Okay, so just to introduce myself, you didn't get a chance to see me yesterday, I was giving my LinkedIn presentation, but my name is Megan Raney. I'm the Assistant Director of Career Preparation here at UMKC. We in higher education, we like our long titles, but essentially that just means that I'm here to make sure that everyone feels career ready and that they have all the tools that they need. But you'll see on my little introduction here, that's not a pretty standard one, meaning that I wanted to show you my career pivots or just to give you some insight about the different changes I've faced. So we're looking at here, I have one major industry change. So that means that I immediately after graduating college went into insurance, and then I switched and went into higher ed. And so that was a major industry change for me. That means that I had to learn a brand new set of skills, get used to a brand new environment. If you ever have any understanding of the corporate world and the higher education world can be very, very different. And so that was an interesting change for me. When I got into higher ed, I had 3 different role changes. And so that means I had 3 different responsibilities. I got into student accounts, which is getting into students' numbers and their balances. Then I switched over to academic advising. And then finally, I changed over to career development or career coaching. And then once I became a career coach, I then saw 3 different growth opportunities and took advantage of them. And in total, I've been with 4 different companies so far. So I've been in the professional world for, let's say, about 12 years now. And these are my numbers. And actually, I think my numbers might be a little bit smaller than what's pretty average. I find myself lucky in the fact that I don't think I'm going to be doing any more major industry changes. I like my industry a lot, so I can just see myself growing and developing within it. But just wanted to give you guys some context of if we start thinking of ourselves as not necessarily stuck in one direction or one path, then we have a lot more options and it becomes a lot more comfortable with talking about, well, maybe I'm going to make a change and what do I need to do that? So your journey is going to be as fluid as you are, meaning that if you have new interests or skills or the industry changes, for example, 10 years ago, social media managers weren't really a profession, and they're absolutely a dominating profession, especially in the marketing industry right now. Another example I'd like to use is esports. It's not just a video gaming or a time waster. It's a booming industry, especially in higher ed, where a lot of institutions are scrambling to add esports coaches or esports programs and getting really competitive in the athletic scene. So those things didn't exist 10 years ago. So just because you might have graduated in one direction does not mean that you are stuck in that path or heading down that road forever. You have the opportunity to change. So what makes people interested in changing? And here's just a scattered list of probably what we see the most common. I'm going to say number 2 is probably the one I see maybe the most, just because there is that adage of people don't quit jobs, they quit bosses. Poor leadership is something that can adversely affect your job satisfaction. So that's a very, very normal one. But I also want to point out this last one on the left side of I want to work remotely. That obviously is going to be something that is higher in demand in the last 2 years. I would say employers that haven't offered flexibility with virtual options or having, a hybrid schedule, they're the ones that are probably faring a little bit worse. So the ones that are being adaptable or changing are the ones that we see students or interested employees flocking to. So just by, a thumbs up or, putting in the chat, if you just any one of these kind of resonate with you or you've experienced them at any point in your career, or maybe they're one of the ones that you're kind of feeling right now. And so that's what brought you here today. I know for me, I've left places because the commute, that was a big reason for one of my decisions of leaving an organization. And same with lacking growth opportunities. That would be another one that I was really cognizant of when I made one of my career changes, just because it was something that I knew I wanted to have more opportunities above me. And if I hit a ceiling, I wasn't going to be able to do that. So just to kind of give you some more context, again, to normalize this talk about career pivots, the average age a person changes is 39 years old. So some of you that might be right where you're at right now, or you might be thinking that's, years away, or I'm well past that. That, it doesn't matter. It's just saying that the 39-year-old is not your recent college grad. That means that they have at least almost 20 years of experience at that point in time. And so the fact that they're comfortable changing careers at that age should give everyone the feel empowered to do the same. The average people have 12 jobs in their lifetime. And so that can be something that may be of comfort to you. And the idea that maybe you are not even near that number, or you're going to be kind of, like once you look at your retirement projection and say like, yeah, that might sound about right. Again, that's not necessarily you're switching industry, switching skill sets every single time, but it just kind of gives you some context of what we're seeing and what's most average nationwide. And then the last one here is just saying a number that doesn't surprise any of us who are in the career advising side of things, is that most people are actively looking for a change, even if you're not actively applying for a job or different industries. Just the fact that you might be open to it or might be interested, maybe you hop on Indeed, once a month just to see what's out there. Perfectly normal. It's something that people are doing. And I guarantee you, if you're not doing it, some of your coworkers are. So it's just something to kind of keep in mind. This isn't meant to scare anyone from, thinking that everyone's going to leave you, or that, you're going to be losing 70% of your workforce. Not at all the case, but it's just saying that people are open to new ideas and new opportunities, and they're getting more comfortable taking advantage of them. I think that that's another big thing that we all learned with the pandemic, is where our values might have shifted and changed. I see a lot more of a demand for work-life balance. And so if there's looking for opportunities that will help grant them that, then that's something that they're going to take advantage of. So if you are looking to switch industries, what are you needing to do? We want to call this like a skills analysis, and there's going to be a two-part way of you doing that. The first is you actually doing a lot of self-reflection about what skills your new desired job or that requires that you already have. And so I ask you to do that because that might mean that you're taking a look of what I do day to day, or what was my job description when I initially applied to my current position, or what was my major in that I got to take advantage of some, internships or projects that I really got to develop those skills, and how can they be valuable in this new role that I'm dreaming up for myself. The second thing that you need to do is going to be a little bit more of an honest reflection of saying, what skills do you need to transfer into that industry? And that second one's going to be a lot more heavy, because sometimes that might mean, okay, now I've identified what skills I need, but how do I actually develop them? We're talking, this could be something as simple as, a YouTube video to possibly needing another degree. So there's a range of how you can work on and get incorporating those skills and learning them. The same would be if you were to say, I learned Microsoft Excel in my computer class when I was in college in 2007. Well, Excel has changed a lot, and it had a lot of new features incorporated in that. So maybe because I have learned something originally in my studies, and I know that if I'm interested in switching gears to a role that would require Excel a lot more, I know I'm going to have to bone up on getting some more of whatever the current platform or the current model of Excel is. So it's just something for you to do some honest reflection on, and seeing what do you need to do to actually start working on those skills. And the thing is, how do you even know what you'll need? So yeah, I'm asking you to think about what kind of skills you'll be needing. But if you're starting out fresh or no context and you're just kind of dreaming here, how do you even know what you don't know? So that's where we really want to encourage you and provide different avenues for you to take advantage of finding this information. Informational interviews with those that are doing the work. That is probably, in my opinion, the most important way for you to get a sense for what skills you might be needing. Now, an informational interview is not an actual interview. That means that there is no formal application. There's no sitting down and answering and you getting peppered with a lot of questions. An informational interview is you being the one to reach out. Ideally, you're reaching out within your network, or maybe you can identify someone within your company that's currently doing a job that you think is really interesting or that you want to learn more about. And it's you asking them some very good questions that kind of get some background on their career journey and then their advice to you on what you can be doing to incorporate it. I want to emphasize that informational interviews are not you asking for a job. You are simply information gathering. That is the goal of those. Now, if they lead to job opportunities, if they lead to recommendations, then fantastic. But if you cannot go into those with that being the expectation, you go into it saying, I'm out there to learn more. People are very willing to share their own career journey. And so if you come into it with open mind, maybe you treat them to coffee, or maybe you come at, you ask them if they wouldn't mind talking to you for 10 to 15 minutes. Having that request and just kind of make it very clear what you're hoping to get out of it will make the most sense. If you need help finding this contact, then that's something I would absolutely recommend that you reach out to us for. You can utilize LinkedIn. And like I said, you can even look in your own industry or your own company. But if you need help making connections, maybe we'll help connect you with a fellow UMKC alum or someone that, an employer that we know is willing to do these kind of conversations. So don't feel like you're out there on your own trying to figure this out. The other way of finding out what skills are very valuable is when you're actually attending hiring events and you have conversations with recruiters. Now, this can be career fairs. This can be, any networking opportunities that that the end goal is actually for them to be promoting their open positions. Even if you're not quite ready to take that leap, if you see that it's a career that you can consider, 1 to 3 years down the road, absolutely feel free to attend these things and have conversations, come in with some good questions. And that would be an appropriate time where you maybe follow up with them, or you indicate that you might apply later, and then you can have different conversations. The difference is the recruiter is helping connect to fill an open position. An informational interview is an individual who's actually doing the work. There's also plenty of online resources for you to kind of see what the changing industries might be looking like. I've enlisted a couple here, ONET, JobScan, and then like I said before, combing through profiles on LinkedIn. Finding information using these resources, again, is going to show you different, JobScan does word clouds. And so it might combine, your skill set, or you can enter in, maybe the information or job description of one that you're interested in, and it's going to pull out what skills are most commonly found in that. And then the last one is just talking with a career coach. This is just another shameless plug to remind you that our services didn't expire with your graduation. So if you need help, please feel free to schedule an appointment with one of us. That way we can have a conversation that gets a little bit more in depth. We can advise you if we're putting on any events that might make sense for you to attend and talk with recruiters. Or like I said earlier, we'll be the ones that might help foster that connection with someone who you might reach out for an informational interview with. Okay. So say that you've already decided, change is coming. I'm going to go ahead and go in this new direction. Well, how is it that you're actually going to start communicating that change? So there's real key pieces of how you can make that announced, specifically in writing. In your summary section of your LinkedIn, and I don't want to get too much into LinkedIn as we covered that yesterday, but in your LinkedIn, you have a chance of having a headline where you have different skill sets or industries listed. It's something that you can absolutely indicate, transitioning to technology, wanting to get into education, aspiring financial advisor. These are different terms that you can use that kind of communicate your intention, help you show up when you're being searched for by recruiters, but it also is an honest thing saying that you might be new to the industry, but you're willing and eager to learn more about it. The resume, we are not a big fan of having objective statements on resumes, but sometimes summaries might make sense, especially if you are switching industries. I always say summaries are a good way of kind of getting ahead of or addressing any questions before any recruiters might ask them. We don't want to confuse anyone by your application. So say that you have a very thorough education resume and you're applying for a corporate position and you haven't addressed anywhere in your resume what your intentions are. I would actually have an idea of like, is this person applying by mistake, or do they understand what we're expecting of them since they're switching industries like this? So if you just put something in your summary section that just indicates how you're going to be or what your intention is and how you're going to be transitioning your skills into this new industry, then that will help address any concerns right off the bat. The same can be done for cover letters. This is also an important way with the same logic behind that is we just don't want to confuse employers. And we want to make sure that we're really communicating what skills that you are bringing with you from your old industry that would be transferable to your new one. And I'll go into an example in the next one, but it's just this idea of this is, I use the example of education going into corporate. And so it's this idea of, yeah, you might know how to do, something very specific with teaching math to, sixth graders. But if you know that you're going to be transitioning to working with adults, what are the similar things that you can use or talk about that the adults would be find relevant that doesn't necessarily need to focus too much on the child development side of things? So this is a good example for how I would incorporate that if I were as in education wanting to transfer my skills into a more corporate setting. I'll give you a second just to read that. So in this example, again, we're not getting into, any state regulations about the subject matter that would have been really ingrained in what a teacher had to learn. And we talk about what the skills are that would be transferable in this example to human resources. So there's absolutely some clear ones, and then there's some not so clear ones. The idea that, someone in HR, they would absolutely be tasked with having measurable goals. That is something that is seen with performance evaluations or advising supervisors on how to do performance evaluations. Teachers would absolutely have to set their own measurable goals, not in a way that they do progress reports for their students. And so rather than using the language, have done progress reports, you just talk about what makes it transferable, what makes it connect to from one industry to the other. Are there any questions with this? I'll just keep on going, but I just want to, again, make you guys feel comfortable. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them. So it just gives you an idea of how we can kind of really own our change and how we can just communicate to employers. We recognize that we may not have 100% of the new skills, but I've got at least 70% of them, and I'm ready to, learn what the rest of them might be. Okay, so another one that is really important is how we're communicating, especially out loud to individuals if we're wanting to make a change. So the first and foremost, the clarify your career vision. So say that you are bored to tears in your current position and you are just, thinking this sounds nice. So this career field sounds nice. And I have like 4 or 5 different interests. Well, you don't want your LinkedIn profile to say, finances and music and education and, career development, like these different ones that are kind of unrelated and seeming scattered. What we'd really want to do is kind of hone our vision specific to whoever we're talking to and really kind of think about how you can incorporate your other interest, whether that's going to be, on the job, or maybe you can incorporate it in different ways that help make you, feel your creativity. But clarifying your vision is going to be an expectation, especially when you talk to employers. So it's important for you to kind of have this idea of, I might be interested in 2 different paths. I'm going to explore both of them, but I'm going to maybe have 2 different versions of my resume. So that way I can have, a more creative field resume, and then maybe a more buttoned up corporate resume. That way I don't have to get, confused between the 2. The other thing I wanted to talk about is avoiding negativity. And I specifically mean this if you are in an interview setting and you are asked the question, well, why are you wanting to leave your position? Or what is it that you're looking for now? It is so easy for us to be, honest, and maybe we might be a little bit too honest and, veer towards negativity. And those examples that I gave at the very beginning, the I hate my boss or I don't like my coworkers, those are very valid reasons for leaving a position. They sound terrible if you say them out loud. There's big red flags with employers, especially if you're in the interview room. And so we want to kind of make sure that we're having a positive spin. We're framing things in a way that might help us sound like we are ready to move forward. We're taking charge of our own path, and we don't let others impact us in such a way that we become, Debbie Downers because of it. And I wanted to show you guys this example. Yes, we get some of our advice from TikTok now. That's perfectly fine.
How to answer, why did you leave your last job during an interview when your last job was toxic AF? So why did you leave your last job? My boss was a nightmare, toxic, sending me emails at midnight, micromanager. I could go on. Let's try that again. I'm aiming to work somewhere that has a positive and motivating environment, and I want to work under leadership that helps me achieve my goals and inspires me. How to answer what?
So I hope you guys can hear the difference of how she framed that in her example, meaning that if you were in a position that, really didn't suit you or serve you and you're looking to get out of it via any means, you don't necessarily need to talk negatively about what your experience was. Just focus on what was positive about your experience or how it's helped clarify your new goals and what you're really looking for. I think when you find out that you hate a specific industry or a certain part of your role, that gives you just as much clarifying because you've now eliminated those options. So you now have a more clear, defined vision of what it is you are looking for. And you can communicate that throughout the hiring process. So that way, you know that your goals are in line with what the hiring needs are. So we talked a lot about, my entire first half of that presentation was specifically if you have control of this pivot that we're talking about, meaning you've decided that you want to leave, you've decided that you want to look for something different. But there's this entire other side of it is maybe something happened where you don't have control over it and it's forced upon you. And so now you're left kind of scrambling saying, now what? So the ones that kind of come to mind was just like the idea of this position was, eliminated or, reduced, or your company was bought and therefore there was redundancy in workforce. And so those positions were removed. That's a very, very common one, especially as companies are merging or having to, adapt to the new workforce or adapt to the new situation about how their industry is being utilized post-pandemic. The changed responsibilities, I can tell you that it's very common for when budget cuts happen, maybe your workload has gotten doubled, or you're having to do the work of 2 to 3 people, and that's just not something that you had originally expected or were interested in. Maybe you were having to take on responsibilities in a role that just was not something that you would have ever applied for. And so now you're kind of forced to think about what it is that you want to do to change. And then the last one's the big one is just if something has happened and you were actually terminated. So that is a different conversation than the layoffs and budget cuts, just because it is something that is more personal and something that you would have to craft a better plan or address the issue a little bit more head on if that was something that you found yourself in. But when we're looking at this, regardless of why you're having to do this, the skills analysis part is the same. If you are having to re-enter the workforce or find a new position, whether you expected to or not, you still have to do that self-reflection piece that those who are willingly, wanting to change positions are looking for. So again, that's the comparing what skills you currently possess versus what ones might still be needed. And this is another one of me just reminding you of how industries have changed. So I know for most individuals, if they've been working for 10 years, they haven't needed to look for another job, and the industry up and changed on them. But that wasn't something that their current employer had to worry about. But now that they're forced to be in this job change, then they might have to kind of update their information. I used the Microsoft Excel example earlier. It's the same with, you might have needed a LinkedIn profile when you were first a job seeker. It's been 10 years and you haven't looked at it. Well, LinkedIn's changed a lot, especially with how the algorithms have adapted. So it is something that you might just have to take, a couple days to really do a lot more research and seeing what's more common and what has, especially if there's, if your company has a competitor or if there's lots of different positions that might be similar, compare and contrast what your job description says and then what you are really expected to do every day with ones that are new in the industry to see if there's any gaps. Again, this is really technology that I'd want to encourage and empower everyone to get comfortable with knowing that this might change. Technology changes on us all the time, and don't feel like you can't or aren't capable of learning a new skill. It's absolutely something that's available to you. You just need to have to identify how much or what kind of resources or supports are needed. Again, we're a big fan of encouraging that self-learning, but if it does mean additional training or certification or education, then that's something that we'd really want to talk to you guys about to see if that's you're going to see the return on that investment or not. Now, how you can update your resume, this is more specific as if something happened that you were, that it was in progress or that you want to communicate that you didn't have the say, but you still accomplished a lot. Just because you were let go from a position does not mean that all of your accomplishments or responsibilities from that position were suddenly eliminated along with it. So it's just something that, if an individual was, their position is eliminated, sometimes I might incorporate this first one onto as a bullet point on their resume just to help clarify why they ended up leaving. This has also been if the company is relocating and you were unable to relocate with them. For the projects disrupted by COVID, we saw this a lot with our students, especially if they were, set to give a presentation and then suddenly it went away or they weren't able to give that opportunity. That doesn't mean that all that work that, went into preparing for the presentation is not valuable. So I had them still describe the project, describe the presentation, and then just add a line saying, wasn't actually able to present because of this reason. It's a lot more understandable. And it's just one of those things that they don't, especially if you were, only on a position for a couple of months and you need it still on your resume to showcase some skills or to fill in some gaps, just kind of addressing why, if, especially if it was something that was outside of your control, how you can kind of qualify that on your resume. So let's talk about the biggie. And just to kind of give you an example of, if you were actually terminated from a position, meaning that is something that is a much more personal one. When we are working with our clients, with our students, we just want to advise them that, it's what you do is you need to be honest about, the fact that if you were terminated, there's no sense in lying about it just because that's easily found out. But we don't have to get into the nitty gritty of why it was. We can be brief. So I just encourage it to be kind of upfront, say, this is the reason, but this is what I've been doing since then to ensure that it's never going to be an issue again. So in this scenario, this example, I said this was, my idea was this person was fired because they claimed to have some skills that they didn't. And therefore, when push comes to shove and they needed to demonstrate those skills, they weren't able to. So it's really just kind of saying, we're calling that a fit issue. So we're having this issue of saying that the individual says, I'm really stronger in this. Since then, I've learned this. I've learned to read job descriptions more thoroughly, and I've learned to communicate with employers throughout the hiring process, meaning that they're not lying in an interview claiming to have any skills that they're not, but they really do want to highlight their own skills, highlight their own strengths, and try to seek out opportunities that would help utilize those more. So again, we be brief and honest about maybe the reasoning, but then what have we done since then? Perhaps you had a personal issue and it's no longer affecting you. Saying something like that, saying, I've been able to set better boundaries, and so I'm no longer needing to take as much time off. Or you can talk about, I made a mistake, and since then I've taken a couple of extra classes. I've really matured, and here's my plan going forward to ensure that that never happens again. Employers can be very forgiving, especially in a season where they're hurting for workforce, which is where we're at right now. But what they would still expect from you is how you can assure them that it won't be an ongoing issue, that you have learned your lesson and this is what you're doing to grow from that mistake, because it's something that you have now control over. And again, it was something that we can chalk up to being a one and done, and therefore you can continue to move forward. I know this one's big and it's really hard to capture if termination is something that you have faced or have been handed, then it's something that you might want to have a more in-depth conversation with a career coach, just one-on-one, so that way we can maybe help you practice or hone your own pitch of how you can address that. I think it would be important just to help make sure that you have someone else just kind of giving you some feedback of what makes sense for your particular situation. And so just to conclude with you guys, just to understand that, when we're dealing with career pivots, the important things are kind of universal. So whether or not it's something that you've chosen to take on or something that has been forced on you, the important things are still going to be there. Growing your network. We've all heard that saying of it's not what you know, but it's who you know. That's still true. And your network can do wonders for you and how it will help you navigate new areas. Again, that's part of having informational interviews, is utilizing your network to find out more about desired industry. You being able to articulate your career goals is going to be important, especially when you're in the position of talking to a hiring manager. So that's oftentimes in an interview setting. You need to be able to articulate what it is you are interested in learning more of and why you are going to be a good fit for this new role. Recognizing and honing your skills, that's that skills analysis. We've already talked about that, but it's just, again, making sure that you have a good understanding of where your strengths are and where any gaps are. And then from those gaps, you're going to identify, how can I get better at that, or how can I address that? Staying current on industry standards. Again, that's just saying we understand that what the rules were in 2010 and 2000, they're not necessarily the same for 2022. And so just being open and flexible with the idea that industries change, you will need to change along with them. And then utilize your resources. That means that the online resources I shared earlier, as well as any of the conversations that we're encouraging you to have with our offices, or making sure that you're connected with any events that we might have on campus, like the networking event that we're having tomorrow evening for you guys. These are things that we want to encourage you to take advantage of. Again, these services are available to you. So we see career coaches out there who are, charging $75, $150 an hour. You have, access to a cache of career coaches available to you that you've technically already paid for because you paid your tuition. So this idea of please utilize our services. There's something that we want to encourage and empower you that they're available to you. If you also want to log on to Handshake, that's how we'd schedule any appointments. But if you want to get a hold of us, this is the easiest way to do so. So if you're part of our one of our block alum, meaning that you've got a business major, you're going to be emailing the block career services. Anyone else is going to be emailing us at the career services side of things. And then just reminding you that Handshake is not only our job search platform, but it is how we schedule appointments. So alumni have access to that as well. If you're a recent alumni, you should still be able to log in. If you've been a little bit farther out, then you might need to send us an email and we'll walk you through the steps of how you can have access to that platform as well. And that's all I had for you guys. Are there any questions, comments, or you've got a couple of coaches along this chat with you, so feel free to utilize us while you're here. And outside of that, that's all I have for you guys. So I will hang out for a couple more minutes. But if you guys, thank you guys for being here today. And we really appreciate it. And again, check out our last session happening tomorrow. So we have not only ways of how you can get involved on campus, or stay involved with UMKC, but also we have that networking event in the evening, so for you guys to actually meet each other face to face, and so that we can practice that networking skill together.